carved his face into mountains, printed his portrait on currency, built monuments in his honor. But the real George Washington died centuries ago, suffocated beneath marble lies and bronze deceptions. Picture this, a 22-year-old giant in a world of smaller men, 6'3" with hands like sledgehammers. Those hands had already squeezed triggers, watched men die. His first command nearly ignited a world war. George Washington was born into a world built on human bondage. At 11, death stole his father, leaving him landless among Virginia's tobacco kings. A giant boy pressing his face against windows of wealth. Every dawn he measured himself against his half-brothers. Men who inherited empires while he inherited hunger. In his bedroom, a teenager scratched rules for perfect behavior into his diary, each word bleeding desperation. Ohio Valley, 1754. Lieutenant Colonel Washington carried a message to French soldiers. Leave or face consequences. Instead, his men's muskets spoke first, killing a French diplomat, setting two empires ablaze across continents. I heard bullets whistle past my ears, he wrote his brother afterward. And believe me, there is something charming in their music. Death had kissed him gently, left him addicted to danger's embrace. Fort Necessity became his wooden tomb. Surrounded, drowning in his own mistakes, forced to surrender to men whose comrade he'd kill. The 22-year-old signed his name to an admission of assassination, in French, language of his shame. Humiliation carved scars into his soul deeper than any blade. He fled home to Mount Vernon, married Martha Custis, a wealthy widow whose children would never whisper father to the man who needed family most. For 15 years, he played Virginia gentleman while debt devoured his dreams. By candlelight, he counted losses, tobacco prices falling, London creditors circling like vultures over his beloved Mount Vernon's rotting corpse. Every tobacco leaf sailed to London in British ships. Every luxury passed through British hands. Washington discovered that colonial prosperity was an illusion, economic chains disguised as imperial protection and commerce. The Stamp Act branded British greed onto every colonial document. In Williamsburg's smoky taverns, younger firebrands spoke of rebellion while Washington sat silent, his massive frame coiled like a spring awaiting release. June 1775. Congress needed someone to command their farmer army. John Adams nominated the silent giant who'd worn his old military uniform to every session, a 6'3" advertisement for his own ambition. I beg it may be remembered, Washington told Congress with studied humility, that I do not think myself equal to this command. His words dripped false modesty while his heart hammered with desperate desire. Cambridge revealed his new army, boys playing soldier with rusty hunting rifles, barefoot farmers who hadn't been paid in months. These scarecrows would face the world's most terrifying military machine. He'd never commanded more than Virginia militia. Now 20,000 lives hung on his untested judgment. Alone in his tent after midnight, he wrote Martha letters signed, "Your ever faithful and increasingly frightened husband." Boston, March 1776. His men dragged cannons through winter mud up Dorchester Heights. At sunrise, British Admiral Howe discovered artillery aimed at his trapped fleet like daggers at a giant's throat. The British sailed away rather than face those guns, victory without bloodshed. But Washington knew this triumph was borrowed time. Across the Atlantic, King George was forging the largest invasion force in human history. Summer 1776. 32,000 professional killers landed on Staten Island, redcoats and Hessian mercenaries whose business was ending rebellions. Washington's amateur army, half their size, waited on Manhattan like lambs before wolves. Brooklyn Heights, his baptism in military disaster. In 8 hours, British steel carved through American dreams, leaving a quarter of his army bleeding in Long Island dirt. By evening, survivors cowered against the East River, trapped like animals. That night, fog rolled off the sea like God's own shroud. Under this divine camouflage, Washington ferried 9,000 ghosts across black water. Dawn revealed empty trenches. His greatest victory was learning how to lose. Retreat became his dark art. Through burning Manhattan, across bloody New Jersey, over the ice-choked Delaware. Each mile stripped away the Virginia gentleman, revealing something harder. A survivor forged in American winter. December 1776. His army evaporated like morning mist. Enlistments expired, soldiers walked home. Tom Paine wrote about souls being tried by fire, while Washington's soul was being reforged in ice and despair. Christmas night, 1776. While drunken Hessians celebrated in Trenton's warm houses, Washington led 2,400 ghosts back across the Delaware. Ice sliced their boats like razors, frostbite devoured their fingers, victory demanded blood sacrifice. Trenton dawn. Hungover German soldiers stumbled into streets to find American steel waiting. In 3/4 of an hour, Washington captured nearly 1,000 mercenaries. The revolution's funeral became its resurrection. Victory meant nothing to starving men paid in worthless paper promises. Continental currency bought less each day while his soldiers fought for phantom wages, marched on empty stomachs, bled for congressional lies. Valley Forge. 12,000 men built a necropolis of log huts in Pennsylvania snow. They ate fire cakes, flour and water baked on stones, while their bloody footprints painted crimson trails across white winter. His officers whispered of making him America's first king. Instead, he knelt alone in frozen woods, praying to whatever God watches over revolutionaries and fools, begging for strength to save his men's souls. Baron von Steuben arrived from Europe's finest armies, carrying Prussian discipline in his aristocratic blood. This gay German nobleman taught American farmers to march like Caesar's legions, democracy learning to drill with European precision. Monmouth, June 1778. For the first time, his amateur soldiers stood their ground against British professionals. General Clinton's retreat in darkness proved American boys had become killers. Washington had forged an army from raw iron. 6 years of war aged him 30 years. Boys who enlisted with smooth cheeks returned home with dead eyes. Washington's auburn hair turned winter white while responsibility carved deep canyons across his once handsome face. Benedict Arnold, his most beloved general, the son he'd never fathered. Arnold's betrayal sliced deeper than British bayonets. At West Point, Washington discovered that even heroes sell their souls when pride turns poisonous. Whom can we trust now? He asked his remaining officers. In war, paranoia becomes survival wisdom. Every letter might hide enemy secrets. Every aide might wear British gold. Every victory might camouflage defeat. Yorktown, October, 1781. British General Cornwallis surrendered his sword to American independence. Washington refused personal glory. Such honors belong to subordinates. True power reveals itself through restraint, not ceremony or conquest. The impossible had birthed itself. 13 quarreling colonies had murdered the British Empire's reputation. But what monster would rise from victory's ashes? A loose confederation where each state guarded jealously against its neighbor's ambitions. Colonel Nicola's letter arrived like temptation wrapped in patriotic ribbons. The same abilities which led us through war can establish perfect independence. America needs a king, and that king must be you. Washington's reply scorched the paper. No occurrence in the war has given me more painful sensations. Power corrupts good men daily. He would not let ambition transform him into the tyrant they'd fought to destroy. December 23, 1783. Before Congress in Annapolis, he surrendered his commission as commander-in-chief. King George III heard the news and whispered, "If he does this, he will be the greatest man alive." Christmas Eve, 1783. He rode home through Virginia snow, finally belonging to himself after 8 years of belonging to America. His horse's hooves crunched freedom into winter silence, the sound of power willingly abandoned. At Mount Vernon, he tried playing private citizen, redesigning gardens, experimenting with crops, entertaining global visitors. But the infant nation was dying, and every letter from friends begged him to save America from itself. Shays' Rebellion. Massachusetts farmers with pitchforks shut down courts, threatened judges, burned the social contract. Democracy was devouring its own children while the Articles of Confederation proved as worthless as continental currency. Philadelphia, 1787. The Constitutional Convention officially met to repair the Articles. Secretly, 55 revolutionaries planned to murder the existing government and birth a new nation. Washington presided over this brilliant conspiracy of genius. 4 months of democratic agony. Large states battling small states, North fighting South, slavery wrestling freedom. Summer heat intensified tempers while closed windows preserved secrecy. The future suffocated in its own birthplace. Washington spoke perhaps a dozen words during months of debate. His silence commanded more respect than Hamilton's brilliance or Franklin's wit. When tempers exploded, delegates looked to him, authority incarnate without needing to speak. The Constitution emerged from exhaustion and compromise, a presidency so powerful that delegates assumed only Washington could fill it safely. They wrote the job description while staring at their inevitable first choice. February 1789. Every single elector voted for George Washington, unanimous choice for first president. He accepted like a condemned man accepting execution, knowing every precedent he set would echo through unborn centuries. April 30th, 1789. On Federal Hall's balcony, he placed his massive hand on a Masonic Bible and swore to defend the Constitution. Those words had never been spoken before. He was inventing the presidency with every breath. Should people bow to presidents or shake their hands? Should he live like a king or a common citizen? Every choice became eternal precedent while democracy and dignity wrestled for America's soul. Hamilton wanted federal power. Jefferson feared it. Washington watched his closest advisors become bitter enemies, their friendship dying in his cabinet. The government's heart was tearing itself apart from within. Pennsylvania's Whiskey Rebellion. Farmers refused federal taxes, tarred and feathered collectors, threatened the republic's authority. Washington led 13,000 troops west, the first president to use military force against citizens. He could have crushed rebellion with blood and iron. Instead, he pardoned rebels after they surrendered peacefully. Mercy became another precedent. Federal power strong enough to defend itself, wise enough to forgive enemies. 2 terms, 8 years. Every advisor begged him to continue. Only you can hold the Union together. But he'd watched power corrupt good men into tyrants. He would not let ambition destroy his life's masterpiece. His farewell address warned against the baneful spirit of party after watching Hamilton and Jefferson's hatred poison the government. Political parties, he predicted, would murder the republic like cancer destroys healthy bodies. March 4th, 1797. John Adams took the presidential oath while Washington sat in the audience, the first ex-president in world history. Power passed peacefully like a sacred flame, proving republics could survive their founders. December 12th, 1799. Cold rain soaked his clothes during a long horseback inspection of Mount Vernon. By midnight, his throat was closing. Death stalked America's indispensable man through his own beloved fields. His final words, "'Tis well." He faced death like he'd faced everything else, with quiet courage and unbreakable dignity. At 10:20 p.m. on December 14th, America's father breathed his last breath into winter darkness. Napoleon Bonaparte learned of Washington's death in his Parisian palace and ordered 10 days of mourning. "The New World has lost its greatest ornament," the French emperor declared. Even tyrants recognized genuine greatness. They carved him in marble, painted him crossing rivers, built monuments to his memory. But the real Washington was infinitely better than mythology. He was beautifully, imperfectly, courageously human. He owned 300 slaves, then freed them in his will. He loved liberty while living with its contradiction. This moral complexity made him human, and being human made him great. What made him immortal wasn't perfection, it was restraint. In an age of kings and emperors, he chose to remain a citizen. He could have been America's first dictator. Instead, he became its first example. The man who could have been king taught America that leaders must serve, not rule. His greatest victory wasn't winning wars, it was walking away from absolute power when victory was complete.